number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm Patrick Cristiano, your host, the publisher of TheaterLife.com, a website for theater buffs in New York City and the Hamptons. And we are coming to you from the LTV studio in Wainscott. And I have a very special guest today, a dear old friend of mine, Joan Giordano, the artist. Joan, thank you so much for coming out to do this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. You're one of my favorite people in the world. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, thank you. I'm so
And you're one of my favorite
here.
artists on top of it, which just makes it ultra cool to have you in the studio. So thank you again for coming.
It is my pleasure, Patrick. So glad to be here.
So Joan, was it last year or the year before you did a show? You had a piece in the White Gallery, or a couple pieces in the White Room in Bridgehampton, right?
Yes, it was last summer, and it was C Fine Art that brought my work to Bridgehampton, and that was after having been with C Fine Art for several of the art fairs that spring. And she sold several pieces and then put some work into the White Room Gallery.
And the stuff you had at the White Room Gallery also sold too, didn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was
which is
very
always nice.
It was a wonderful thing. Yeah.
But you know what I really want to do is kind of do a retrospective of your work, and we have a lot of the images to show the people that we've put together to kind of go through the different periods the evolution of your process. I love talking about process and how people move from one thing to the next and how things happen. So we're going to start with some images when I first met you, which takes us back to Amagansett, where we rented a house. Do you remember we had a house in the dunes?
Yes,
beyond
I
the
do.
Stretch,
yes.
And you would actually pour. I mean, that was in the middle of that period because you had already started painting in the 70s, and this was in the 80s. So you were in the midst of your poured painting series, which we're going to pure abstraction is what you refer to it as.
Yes, they were purely abstract. They were big canvases, 50 by 80 or 60 by 80s. Yes, this one is called Early Spring, and it's layered upon layered upon layer of oil paint that dried in the sun. If you remember, I did this piece outside. I remember it perfectly, and it was wonderful to see the layers build up, but they had to dry, and so the Hampton sun was wonderful.
So a layer would dry before you would pour another layer. Is that how that happens?
Yes, so it wouldn't squish together.
So how long does it take to create one like that? Say.
Well, I would do them in 1 or 2 sittings. So I would allow the layers to dry and then pour again. Some of them would meld together. But you controlled it. You controlled it by tipping the canvas itself, and those were the large paintings I did during that period.
Let's see some more of these. Oh, that's gorgeous too. This is poured too?
Yes, that's called Montauk Sunrise, and I think we did that one. That was one that was painted around the 4th of July weekend.
And that was done out here?
Yes, it was.
And when we were in that house?
Yes.
No kidding. Wow.
This is a little later.
And this is also about 60 by 80 as well?
This is a little taller. This is probably around 70 by 80, and I call it Red Edge. Came a bit later. Mm-hmm. And it was done in my studio in Soho. At the time, I had a studio in Soho.
I remember your studio in Soho.
Yes.
Yes. And then this is from that same period too. I remember this painting.
This is called Nikki's World, and it has a real special meaning for me. It was painted just at the time of the AIDS crisis when it first began, and it's for a very dear friend and cousin who I loved very much. And he moved. It's about his life. It's called Nikki's World. He grew up on Staten Island, became a physician, moved to California and worked for LA County Hospital. He's one of the head physicians there. And he found out very early on that he had AIDS. And so he died at that time, and I painted his world with the bridge coming from Staten Island and all of his accomplishments, and then that was his world.
Who has that painting now?
I don't know who has it.
Because all your
possibly his partner.
All your paintings from this period are gone, right?
Yes, they are. His partner possibly has that painting. I'm not quite sure. I know I don't.
And so from the poured and the abstraction period, you started doing lithograph figurative work. So we have one of those too. Let's show that.
That was the time after graduating Pratt and getting an MFA. I began making lithographs with Bob Blackburn. It was a big printmaking workshop in New York City on 17th Street. And the lithographs, of course, were figurative. They were huge torsos without heads, and I did many of them there. But I began tearing them out because they were so
Let's see the next one.
Powerful.
This is a lithograph, or these?
No, these are. I began making at that time dimensional. After tearing the torsos out of the paper.
How big is this one?
That's a maybe 20-foot long wall. That's 12, 15 feet high.
So this is 15 feet by 20 feet?
Yes. And
that's huge.
There are two dimensional torsos that were made from handmade paper. I was making paper at the time. And behind them are drawings. So the torsos are coming away.
Let me just stop for 1 second.
Okay.
So you started making the handmade paper before you got into. So when did you start making the paper?
I began making paper
just before the lithographs.
During the time of right after the lithographs.
And what drew you to making paper?
I wanted the drawings to become dimensional. And paper can be dimensional if it's handmade, because it's the cellulose in the paper that holds it together and can become as dimensional as you want it. So these are two.
Let's wait on that picture, because
Okay.
I want to just make a point with Joan on this. If you don't mind, take that down. But what I wanted to make a point about when you started with the paper, it was after the lithographs. But I remember some of your canvases having paper in them also. Not the poured canvases, but after you poured a lot, there were a few that you also incorporated some paper into as well,
Yes.
didn't you?
Yes.
So did you make that paper too, and was that handmade?
It was probably handmade.
But you didn't use it that much? Was that
Well, I began adding paper to my canvases, and then I felt the paper itself had enough merit to just become the artwork in itself.
So now let's go back to when the paper became the artwork. So the paper is the artwork now, right?
Yes.
Is what's
Yes,
happening.
it is.
And these are torsos, because it doesn't show here, they have such dimension to them. I mean these are almost 8 inches deep, right?
Yes, they are. Yes, they're very deep. They probably.
And how high? They're tall too.
They're life size. And those are on
So they're
a
like
record. That's on a CD album cover, and the album cover is a musician, a singer, who's called Cat Power, and she happened to be an assistant of mine, and she asked if she could put my work on her album cover.
And she performs all over the world now.
She is.
Cool.
She does. She's all over the world. I haven't seen her in ages.
Now, is that all the stuff in the figurative, or do we have more figurative stuff?
Well, the others are semi-figurative.
So let's get to the next. So, but this is the Steel Angels.
That's one of the first Steel Angels, and that's hanging off the wall in a very precarious manner. It's a very deep, maybe 8 inches deep, aluminum with handmade paper on it.
So, and I remember your process on this, believe it or not. You told me you used to rub the color into the aluminum by hand. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And then after you rub the color, you would apply the paper?
Yes.
And then you would even apply more color afterwards until you got the kind of...
Right, and sometimes encaustic wax on top of the paper as well to give it a sheen, or to just kind of close off the paper surface.
Yeah, and here's another steel angel. Now, how big is this one?
That's about maybe 25 inches tall by 60 inches wide. And that's called
So
Spirit.
this is 5 feet wide.
Yes, it's Spirit of the Planet. And that went to one of the embassies. That became a painting that ended up at an embassy in American embassy in Austria. And they named their entire collection after it, Spirit of the Planet.
Oh, how
It
cool.
was,
Well, can we go back to Spirit of the Planet just for a second?
Sure.
Because this is 5 feet across almost, you're telling me.
Yes, it is.
So that's huge. And this is all folded copper
yes.
that then you rub the color onto, and the blue is the paper, right? That's all blue paper.
The blue is a paper with encaustic wax on that intensifies the color.
And this is handmade paper too.
Yes, it is. It's handmade paper.
Archive quality too.
Always. And the copper is patinaed so that it looks like it's aged. So I added patina and acid to patina it.
And when you did these, we can take that down, thank you. But when you did the Steel Angels, you also had a tour of these that went all over the country, and they made this amazing catalog, I remember.
Yes, it was a catalog with a wonderful foreword by Nancy Princenthal. She's a terrific writer and art historian. And it went all over the United States in museums, about 7 different museums,
And
traveled around.
How many pieces toured the show?
There were around 19 pieces.
And they were
very large.
They were tremendous. I mean, I have a small one, but they were tremendous. They were like 6 or 7 feet tall. Some of
Yes,
them.
they were large, all created, and they traveled from museum to museum.
It was an extraordinary exhibition. I love those Steel Angels, like as
And
much as I do the poor paintings. I love all your work, so I'm prejudiced.
What I
about
have
it.
left are the gorgeous catalogs.
Let's see. What's next? This is another Steel. How big is this one?
This is about 4 feet tall and about 2.5 feet wide.
And
It's
again,
really small.
folded copper. I mean, because the
Yes.
depth isn't showing in the pictures for some reason. It doesn't. I don't. Do you think it translates as well?
No, they could have, if they were larger, I think they would have translated better, but they're small images, and you know, that doesn't have the depth that it. This is called tighter ties, and it's tied with copper from the burnt out telephone wires in New York City, and I collected that copper. I would go to a demolition yard and pick up old copper, and they would weigh it. I'd buy it by the pound and use it along with handmade paper in my copper sculptures.
We have one that looks like this. It has the copper tied in it too, because we have 2 of the Steel Angels, but they're small ones.
Oh.
I know you don't remember these kinds of things. And here's this one is beautiful. It's got the copper in it too. It's really cool.
That's called Earthling, and it just has a very earthy, kind of ancient look. Many of them have an ancient look because I love climbing through ruins. I've done a lot of archaeological digs over the life of my work. When I began working, I've always been interested in archaeology and how things age, and that's one of the reasons I use copper, because I can age it any way I'd like to age.
You can speed up the process. in
Yes,
other words,
I can.
as you can accelerate to
Right.
get it to where you want.
Right.
Now, what do we have here?
Oh, that's called Jedi, and that's
This is still one of the Steel Angels. This is still a paper period. This is all handmade.
This is the first piece I did just with handmade paper. There's no metal in it at all, and that's all different types of handmade papers.
And then the color is rubbed onto it again.
Yes.
Afterwards.
Right.
I mean, after you sculpt it, or in the process of
After it's sculpted.
after it's
paper
sculpted,
goes-
you put the color
paint,
on.
Paint goes on. Yes, right.
Okay, that's incredible. And then we move to the next period.
Oh, that was after and then I
Take that
had
down
a
for a second.
fellowship to Japan.
Yes, let's take that down for a second, because in that period, right?
Yeah.
When you went to Japan, you studied paper making with the ancient Japanese paper masters. Is that
Yes,
right?
he was a national treasure. He was one of the best paper makers and national treasures in Japan. And I was invited. They gave me a fellowship to come and work with him, and together we developed artwork, large paper pieces that would hold their shape. After the paper was formed and dried. And that first one is called Washi Warrior, and washi is paper in Japanese, and so it became Washi Warrior because of the look of it had almost a metallic look that would be something that a protective garment on a.
Let's see it again. Let's see it again. The warrior painting. Here, this one here, and this is about 12 feet tall, right?
Yeah, this is a little larger than life size, and it's really, if you can see it as a large as a person, that's the way I see it.
Yeah. And what's the next one? And we're close on. This is another huge. This is huge too, right?
Yes, that's one of the presences. I had a show called Presences, and each of the pieces became. Rather than curved like Washi Warrior, they were long, narrow forms that were away from the wall 4 or 5 inches and cast shadows on the wall. And I ended up having a show called Steel Angels, Presences rather, and in a gallery, a Japanese gallery on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. It was called Tenri Cultural
I think
Institute.
I came to that opening actually too.
I think you did too.
Now,
Yes.
and somewhere in this period, after 9/11, you went to the White House. What was this?
Right
Was it
after
before you-
9/11, yes. Well,
Was this before you went to go to the Japanese or after?
No, it was after. I began. Embassies began collecting my work, and they went all over the world. And so I was invited to the White House for breakfast
Oh, cool.
with the First Lady, and right after I had. I already
Was
said
it
that.
intimidating? Was it a really cool experience?
It was a fabulous experience. She was the warmest, nicest person. There were a few of us, and we had breakfast with Laura Bush. It was just, I guess, their thank you for having,
Bringing
having
art into
had, for having had so many of the works in the embassies around the world. My work has gone from Austria to Zambia to, I can't even remember all of the countries that they've been to.
And you have a gallery, the June Kelly Gallery.
Yes, I'm represented by June Kelly Gallery and her in Soho on Mercer Street, and I'll be having a show with June soon in the fall. And if you'd like to find out when my show is, or if you're interested in coming to look at the work, please take a look at my website, www.joangiordano.com.
JoanGiordano.com. Her name is up on the board. You can see the spelling of it. So it's JoanGiordano.com. You can see everything that she's up to. And you also had a retrospective. But we have. Should we go to the? Let's because we have a little time. Let's go to the last period, because even this period morphed yet again. Joan keeps recreating herself in her work, and we come to this new period. Tell us about it.
Well, so from the poured paintings, how do you get to more political work? And I began collecting. Newspapers from around the world, international newspapers, and weaving them together.
And then we'll put it back.
I began weaving together international newspapers that. And named them. The names were very, very key to what the meanings were. This is the one that we just saw is called Free Press,
So this is the free press sheet. They put it back up for us.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's Who Owns the News. I'm sorry. It's
Who Owns the News?
Who Owns the News.
How
70
apropos.
Right.
You were so far ahead of your time.
Who spins it and
And who's spinning it now?
Right.
Oh, dear.
Yes.
Go back to the other one, please. I just want to...
this is called magical thinking because
you're jumping back
Oh,
around.
you're back again. All right.
Who Owns the News? Is this...
Right. It's yes. Who writes it? Who spins it? Who owns it? Is it and how much power does it have, or do the people who write the news have?
And how that's a big piece too, right?
Yeah.
Again, how big is that one?
Well, that's about 8 feet tall.
And this is another one.
This is called magical thinking, and it's handmade paper, plus it's corrugated cardboard that I burn, the burnt edges, and weave together with encaustic wax and international texts from France and Italy and China and South America, New Zealand, and I've been to most of those countries, and so I have my pieces.
Let's have that again. That's how big is that one?
That's about, I think that's around 8 feet tall.
Oh, it's fabulous, Joan.
Thank you.
It's really lovely.
This is called Fahrenheit 451, and it's about surveillance society and how.
How big is this one too?
This is a little smaller.
It's a little smaller.
Yeah, that's 45 by 32 inches by about 3 inches deep.
But again, it has all kinds of dimension. It's sculptural.
Encaustic, wax, and international newspapers, and burnt paper, corrugated paper. It's called Fahrenheit 451 after the book.
We have some more here, I think.
Oh, this is huge. This is about 9 feet long, and it's in it's a TV station bought that one. It's in their conference room.
And how big is it?
That's about 7 or 8 feet wide and 4 feet high.
And that's got dimensions to it too.
Yeah, that's all corrugated
how deep is
with
it?
rolled newspapers. Too? Yeah, 3 or 4 inches deep.
And does it have a name?
It does have a name. I wish I remembered.
Okay, it's not important.
What is it called? It might be called Free Press. No, it's not. I'm not quite sure.
Do we have more of that? Is that all the images we have from that period?
I think that's the last image I brought here from that period.
And then you had a retrospective last year, 2018. Where was that again?
That was at the Catskill Art Center in Livingston Manor, New York. And it's a beautiful art center. And I had a 25-year retrospective, 25 years of my work from the early pieces.
Did they have some of the board paintings? Did you have any of that?
I didn't really. I had instead a lot of lithographs and prints, but they didn't have the port paintings. I went back 25 years. Port paintings were done a little
We're not ready for those yet, guys. They're annoying me today.
So the dimensional work that everyone is examining there is called opus.
Okay, let's put it up.
And it's that again is about surveillance. And it's a little, there's a little city built on top. Those rolled newspapers are from different countries.
This is a picture from the retrospective of the people examining the work up close. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. So that has newspapers, wallpaper, encaustic paint. It's mixed media, and it's, as you could see, it's pretty tall. This is I did give a talk about the work.
So this isn't from the retrospective. This is a different.
This is at the retrospective.
Okay.
When I was able to give a talk about my work and the evolution of the work, and that's Sally Wright, who's the director and curator of the Catskill Art Center, and I am sitting there checking my notes and talking to an audience.
But that's the lovely thing. Oh, Barry, they're throwing pictures at us when we don't call for them. I don't understand why. You're annoying me, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
But that's sequential because that was my last show, the retrospective.
No, but I mean, so this, no, it's terrific. It's wonderful.
I'm defending them.
Oh. Now your retrospective is going to be in the fall. We're going to get the dates, and it'll be posted on your website.
Yes, that'll be my exhibit at June Kelly Gallery. It'll be posted on my website. Please go to my website and check it out.
And this was wonderful, Joan. Thank you so much for coming to do this. They want to show, Barry's got some pictures he wants to show from our collection. So we have a couple more. This is from your period that we have.
Oh.
Isn't that?
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. That had to be the 70s?
No,
or was that the 80s?
It was a piece you didn't want to sell initially, I remember. So, and then we have a torso too. This is really beautiful. This is one of your first torsos too.
Yes, it is. I could see that.
And it's got dimension to it, and it's life size.
It's handmade paper that's very tactile and textured. It has wax on, encaustic wax and paint, and yarn that was dipped into that mohair yarn that was dipped into paper pulp, and that's what's hanging on the side. So it could be hair, or it could just be part of the costume.
It's wonderful, Joan. Thank you so much for coming to do this. We're almost out of time. Can you believe it goes pretty fast, right?
It certainly did.
Wasn't too hard, was it?
No. Well, it's not easy to talk about. Making the work is one thing. Talking about it is a whole other.
You did a great job. You'll come back and do it again.
Okay. Thanks. Wonderful. Thanks, Patrick.